You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower. Hey, Garcia here, and thank you for tuning in. Welcome to Confronting Domestic Violence. What we cover is not intended to ignite any triggers. For what you want to conquer, you must confront. And today I have an awesome guest, Tamala. She is here to share her story, some of her struggles, and definitely her triumph, and also what she's doing today to make a difference. Thank you so much, and welcome, Tamala. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Uh, thank goodness. I mean, we've known each other for a little time now, and everything within me, I absolutely love you. So thank you so much for inviting me on your show.
Of course. And for our listeners, I was on her podcast a while ago. I was maybe gosh, I don't know, maybe it was like my fifth show ever. And I was just like, I'm here to practice. I'm just trying. And she just told me backstage that she got some awesome responses and
Yes.
which I was happy to hear. And now I'm
Mhm.
just really privileged and honored to have her as a guest on this show.
Yes, thank you. And it's so wonderful to be here. And I'm so excited for you in this platform. You're going to do great things.
Oh, thank you so much. We find each other. Women who are strong minded, strong willed, that don't have excuses, that just have ways to find solutions. We find
Yes.
each other and we make things happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, goodness. So you shared in backstage that you wanted to talk about some exposure that you had as a child and how it has impacted you. And then, like I said
Mhm.
earlier, and what you're doing today, and of course, how you
Right.
healed. There's so much value that we bring when we go through trauma in life.
Yes, absolutely. So, when you think about domestic abuse, you honestly think about the really uh extreme, right? You think about the bruises that are physical. My introduction wasn't, it was more so I was a child. And as I was saying earlier, growing up, we lived in a high rise. And a high rise isn't really the the best place to raise a child, right? There's no playground, you have to go to an outside park. It's downtown, it's very busy. So it was a beautiful place, but it was me, my mom, my dad, and what was so crazy about it was a one bedroom.
Mm.
And actually, I'll talk more about the book later, but I talk about in the book how I felt like I was the I was the puppy of the house because we had I know it sounds crazy, but it didn't come to me until I actually started writing the book. I used to sleep on a sleeper sofa in the living room. So if anybody were to break in the house, I would be the first thing that they saw, so there was no protection there, right? So I didn't realize that until I started writing the book that I've always had an issue with feeling protected. And so
Mm.
that was one of my first exposures to being exposed to anything or anyone that wanted to get to, the house. But growing up, when we moved in that area, my parents are going through a pretty rough patch, and there was a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming. And of course, in a high rise one bedroom, you can't hide it. You can't, there was, I don't even think there, I don't, in my memory, I was probably about 5. I don't remember a door even to their bedroom. So everything was open. Um, so it got to the point where I realized that I couldn't tell the difference between a happy cry or a toxic cry, because there were times where they would argue and my mother would be distraught and she would cry and cry and cry, and it would place me in a shell. I would always go into a shell when I heard tears because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to process it. So one day she was crying and I could feel myself going into this shell, and she came out of the back, and my dad had actually just bought her a full length fur. So she was happy. She was ecstatic and thrilled. But I was still traumatized by her happy cry because it was so toxic in the house that I could not recognize that there actually would be happy tears, that you could cry when you were happy, you know?
Right.
So with that, what I started to do was always try to make people happy.
Mm.
If people are happy, then there are no tears. There's no one upset, which really led to me being codependent also. So
Right.
those codependent traits start to move forward because you're the fixer. You're always wanting to keep people happy. So as far as physical, I've never had that, but emotional and verbal, that's definite. That's the abuse that was that I dealt with as a child.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's definitely recognized as a form of domestic violence. It falls under
Yes,
that umbrella, mental, physical, emotional, financial.
absolutely.
I mean,
Hmm.
even using technology nowadays is abusive, sexual,
Yes.
economical. I mean, down to gaslighting and narcissistic behaviors. And
Hmm.
some recent interviews lately with some wonderful women, and and I'm learning more as I go, and it's like
Hmm.
there's so many covert ways of being
Right.
manipulative and being abusive that you wouldn't even recognize it because it's a slow manipulation, and before
Hmm.
you know it, you're in that space of, right, crying, not knowing what in the world is
Hmm.
this cry and what shell am I in. It's not
Right.
yours, and you don't belong there, but it's
Right.
something that you're able to recognize.
And have
And
PTSD from, right? When you hear that cry, there's this tension that happens in your chest, and you get this, well, I received this lump in my throat, that I didn't know what to do with, you know. So there was no healthy arguments, or I don't healthy discussions is what I'll say, you know. So it just, yeah. And I didn't think about it until later that, you just kind of pull back because you don't want to feel that. You don't want to have that PTSD pop up at any time.
right, and there's different ways, because you're saying pull back, so that's like, okay, yeah, so retreat from an environment or scenario where you can sense that
Yes.
it might become that. And if that's what's
Hmm.
safest and best for you, personally, I don't think that there's anything wrong with it, because you're able to acknowledge that you're having a physiological change
Hmm.
that is
Yeah.
directly associated with a trauma in the past, and you're
Yes.
not reacting, you are responding, which means that you're putting logic to what is best for you and acting on it. So
Absolutely.
that is post traumatic growth all in itself. I mean, like, hello. Yes. And walk us through that a little bit, like, so how did you conquer that
Mhm.
feeling when it came upon you?
Actually, I ended up having to go through a therapist, I mean, to a therapist,
Okay.
because after I started writing the book, um, I didn't have the memories until then.
Mhm.
So when I started thinking about being that person on the couch, that child on the couch, then it led to me thinking about her receiving that fur. And I could literally feel, I went back to being that 5-year-old child. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I've gone to therapy about all these other things, and you just don't think about things that you absolutely have not addressed yet because you don't even remember it,
Yeah.
right? So, therapy, I had to walk through it, and you go through that reparenting, you know. People feel like, if your parents didn't get it right, you really can go through reparenting on your own to kind of help that child because I didn't, you don't think about, you stay at that age until you work through it. So that's why when I started thinking about it, I literally felt like that child all over again. So, I did my reparenting, did my journaling about it. I even had a conversation with my mom to see if she remembered it, if it was that way, in her experience, right?
Right.
And she was like, yeah, there was a lot of arguing. There was a lot of things that we didn't realize or even think about you being affected. And she was like, she said, and I'm amazed that I didn't remember the physical. So that's not even in my head. So she told me that there was times that it was physical. but that wasn't what I remembered. What got me more was the verbal portion of it. But yeah, so was able to have the conversation with her as well to see, what her remembrance was. And she, definitely confirmed that I was there. I went through it, and all of that. So yeah, still honestly still working through it, because I still have issues if someone tries to raise their voice at me. If they raise their voice, I'm like, okay, how are we gonna deal with this? you know. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I
still
think
working through it.
yeah, you said a lot of great things. I mean, I'm a big advocate about seeking help because the codependency or the extreme independency is how
Mhm.
we as women, strong women, try to cope or get through. And it
Right.
takes a lot to face it.
Yes.
And just because you recognize that there's an issue doesn't mean that you're quite ready to deal with it yourself, or
Mhm.
you are ready, but you don't trust anybody else. So you believe that you can deal with it yourself.
Yeah.
And, when you are the person that is, excuse my terminology here, but when you're the person drowning, you can't throw yourself the lifesaver.
Whew. Is it? Oh my goodness. That is so true. So very true.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I also strongly believe that, our parents, regardless of the environment or, whatever's going on in their life, when they are stuck with us, they are doing or giving the best they can with whatever they have
Right.
at that
Yeah.
moment. And yeah, at some point in our life, whether it's age 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, we get the opportunity to finish raising ourselves.
Yes. Yes. Which is such a blessing, right? I mean, it's a blessing, and for me, I'm a lot of people don't have the opportunity to have their parents acknowledge what they went through. I have a lot of friends that'll tell their mother will tell their parents will tell them it didn't happen that way, you know.
Right.
Where with my mom, she's a recovering alcoholic. Actually, my dad is a recovering alcoholic as well. So they were able to work through things. They did their own work, which is a blessing. So with my mom, she's the one, my dad lives in a different state. So she's here with me and we've done a lot of work together. So I'm really, really blessed that she doesn't, number one, feel like I'm pointing fingers at her rather than healing with her. Because a lot of people will say, no, it didn't happen that way, or no, you're not going to blame me for whatever you feel as though happened or whatever
Right.
you're going through within you. She really she takes her ownership and she works through it with me. So I'm really, really blessed when it comes to that.
Yeah, that takes a strong woman to own up to that, because a lot of us as mothers, when we know that
Mhm.
our daughter is hurting behind our actions, you know, sometimes we will forget some of those facts and convince
Yes.
ourselves because we forgot that it didn't happen.
Right.
But I'm also a firm believer that, the children are exposed to things that we'll never recall, that
Mhm.
we'll never, be able to understand how it impacted them because they were on the receiving end. And
Right.
you guys are entitled to feel what you feel based on what you saw. And as
Mhm.
a child, you don't have the capacity to understand what the heck is going on in the adult life world, So I mean,
Right.
what you received at that stage, age, environment is
Mm.
exactly that. Can nobody take it away?
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Wow. So what a beautiful, I mean, just a beautiful moment that you guys had to forgive each other
yes.
and to work towards just that bond and that
Mhm.
growing relationship. I mean, how did it how did it impact you later when you were, I know you said that when you were writing the book, a lot of the things had surfaced, but teenage years are really rough. What did you go
Oh,
through and where were your outlets? Because back then there was no internet, there was no mental health, there was no,
right.
real support
Mhm.
systems. It was kind of whoever your friends were that were willing to listen. We really
Right.
needed to figure things out on our own. And so
Mhm.
please share like some of those things that you went through and how you overcame them in that teenage
Yes.
years.
So, with teenagers were interesting. So when I was, I think it was early teens, 13, 14, my mom told me. that she was an alcoholic and she was going to have to go and get help. So that led to her going to AA meetings. I went to Al teen meetings, which was wonderful because I had other children who who went through some of the similar things that I went through. So I was able to talk and have, not feel so alone, because my family, there's a lot of addiction in my family. And so it's looked at as normal, right?
Right.
My mother was one of the first ones to say, this is not normal. And I'm grateful for it. But because in the past and in that present, it was normal, I felt like we were the outcast. So it was nice to be able to have other teens and other children to be able to talk to and understand what it felt like to be in the household of addicts. So all of this led to me knowing more about codependency, even though I didn't know it had a name at the time. Because when my mother and my father were both in their addiction, I had to raise my siblings. So it was my job to make sure that, and this is another form of abuse, actually. It was my job to make sure that everything was locked up, that eyes were off on the stove, that my siblings were fed and okay. My mother, what she would do, she would pick me and my siblings up from daycare or my grandmother's. She would go home, she would cook, she would make sure we did our homework, and then she would go in the room. We never saw her drunk, ever. She would close the door, and that was her drinking time. The only time I would see her when she came out is if I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw her stumbling to the bathroom. So because she wouldn't come out, it was someone had to make sure that we were in bed. We were good because my dad worked at night. Okay. So there were a couple times where I would wake up and the house would be smoky because she would have started to cook and she had fallen asleep. Okay. That's that PTSD, right?
Right.
One time she was sitting in a chair and she was falling into a stupor. I didn't know this at the time, but she was smoking a cigarette and the couch was smoking, right? And maybe this is, and I can't say beforehand, I knew that she was drunk. I didn't know. I just thought she had fallen asleep, was in the chair smoking, woke her up. Oh my God. And so that gave me that I've got to make sure that the house is okay.
Right.
So that's how I ended up being codependent. You become the fixer. You want to make sure that everybody's okay, everything is good, and all of that.
And that was that natural, or that was asked of you?
It was natural.
Yeah.
She felt like she was doing everything she was supposed to do. We were fed. We were, homework was done. Mommy's done. Go watch TV till you're ready. That was it. So that led to me being codependent to the point. This is how codependent I was. We had a family friend that was very, very close to us. And actually, it was two families. It was a family that lived across the street from my grandmother and our family. We were all very close, grew up in the same neighborhood. One of their, I'll say it was the owner of the house, it was her grandson came to live with them in that house. And we were all very close. It was one Thanksgiving. I was 15. I ran home to grab something. He came over and he was like, hey, are you over your grandmother's for Thanksgiving? I was like, yes. I need to run to the house. Didn't even think about it. Left the door open. He came in behind me and ended up raping me in my room. Yes. And got up, left, went back to his grandmother's house. And I was so codependent and didn't want to be a burden to anyone that I cleaned myself up, went back to my grandmother's house, and acted as if nothing happened.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And honestly did not speak about this rape until I wrote the book.
Which was
My
how many
mother,
years later?
25.
Did you tell any of your friends?
Mm-mm.
So how did you like cope with that? What were your thoughts and your feelings towards it? Or
That was, when I was a teen, it was more so ignoring. I just ignored that it happened. I blocked it completely, completely. It was like I was looking at someone else's life.
mm-hmm.
So I had no attachment to it at all. And it was because another reason that happened was I had a best friend that had been raped 2 years prior. And when she told her mom, she didn't say it was her. She just said, "Mom, I have a friend who's being raped." And she was repeatedly raped by her uncle. And she said, and she's being raped by her uncle, and it happens at least once a week. And her mom told her, well, she must like it if she hasn't said anything and it's happening over and over. So I saw how distraught she was after all of that happened. So between me being codependent, trying to be that fixer and make sure that everybody is okay, never angry, never this, never that, when it happened to me, I just had this block. And I never spoke about it, left it alone. I just avoided him and called it a day. Now, the book that I wrote was co-written with my mom.
What is the title?
So
Let our listeners know. What is the title of your book?
the title is God Turned Mommy's Wine into Water. And it's all about her and her addiction, how it moved me into being codependent. So because we're telling this life story, when God gave me the title and in the chapters and everything, I told my mom, I said, God told me that we're supposed to write a book. Mom
Mm-hmm.
told me, God didn't tell me that. It's like, okay. So, but I know what I hear, right? And I know what's real. So I continue to write. So finally she she was like, okay, it is time. We should do this. So I wrote my portion, she wrote hers. We wrote them in same room, but never read each other's portion until it was finished.
Wow.
When it was finished, I told her, I said, let's read it tonight. You know, I said, but I need you to understand, because at this point I had gone through therapy and, um, I talked about the rape later on, but didn't really get down into the nitty gritty of it until I wrote it, because I literally give details about it. And I went through reliving it. You know how I was that 5-year-old? I became that 15-year-old.
That's
I
really
could feel
hard
the
to do.
stinging. I felt everything. Right. And so that was because I had been in therapy for other things. I knew that was the way that I needed to work through it. Plus, do your work outside of that. But I knew I needed to get it out. I needed to make it real because I had been ignoring it for so many years. So when I gave my mom the book, I said, I need you to understand there's a lot of things that you may or may not know in this book. I don't want you to blame yourself for anything. I need you to understand that everything that I've gone through for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty damn happy with who I am today.
Praise God.
So no regrets. No, it's going to be okay. And I know she didn't say it. She just said, oh, okay. But I'm sure on the inside, she was like, what in the world am I going to be reading? Right. So the next day she called me and she said, I read it. And then she started to cry. And she said, never, ever would I have thought. And I was thinking she was going to say that had happened. Never, ever had I thought that I birthed such a phenomenal woman that have gone through so many things that I had no idea, that you have been walking with this weight so beautifully, not being able to free yourself from any of this. And she said, I just need you to know that I love you. And I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there, or I didn't have the real estate to be there for you. And I told her, I said, I appreciate that. But again, I've gone through everything for a purpose,
Yeah.
and I'm all right. So,
Wow, that is so amazing and so honorable. And based on our previous,
yeah.
we
Yes.
have a lot of similar thought processes,
Yes.
and I'm a strong believer in the same thing, like we're not given more than we can handle.
Yes.
Even though it may seem like we can't handle it at the time, we do
Mhm.
get through
Yeah.
eventually. And seeking help and using our voice is most important, because it's that stigma of the
Yes.
of society, and then the self stigma, and then the embarrassment, the pride, the so many
Right.
different things. And what's so unfortunate is that so many of us has gone through trauma, whether it's domestic violence or just flat out any kind of abuse, period. The long list that
Mhm.
we, shared earlier.
Right. Yeah.
And when people do speak up and speak out, even if it's to ask a question, ask for help, or share something,
Mhm.
the abundance of response, the abundance of love and care and
Yes.
desire to help is it pours out. And
Mhm.
I really want to bring that to attention, because there's so many people that stay quiet, that don't have to, because there's
Right.
so many of us that want to help and have the
Right.
experience to help,
Mhm.
and I'm a firm believer on seeking that outside help, because like we said earlier, dealing with it internally postpones, drags it out, and sometimes we don't have the tools and techniques because we're the insider, and we need that
Right.
outsider to, see what we don't see, to lift each other up.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's why I love this platform. This platform is so beautiful because, again, maybe if I had seen or heard or, it was the negative that comes behind in the negative experience that I had seen. I felt like it's best to just be quiet, and it's not.
Mm-mm.
Even when I put it in the book, like I will speak, like you, I went 25 years not even acknowledging it. Baby, I will talk about it at any moment now. And even in the beginning, when the book was first published, I didn't think about it. Like everyone who knew me these past 25 years, they're gonna be like, what? Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, So there was a little bit of, oh, what did you just do? Yeah. What did you just do? But I was okay with that 5 minutes of what did you just do? Because there are so many people that contacted me and was like,
Yep.
me too. And now I want to talk about it. Right. So thank God for your platform. Thank God that you'll have women here that can speak about it and let people know it is okay to say it happened. It is okay to say you did it, right? It's all about healing, right?
It is all about healing. And I think you stopped yourself. You were about to give your words, your wounds to wisdom statement, and you were like, oh, oh. So please go right ahead and say your wounds to wisdom statement.
Thank you. Yes, I want everyone out here to know that there's no reason to be ashamed of anything that you've gone through. Speak on it, have pride in your speaking. Know that anybody that doesn't understand, it's okay because everybody is not where you are. But there are a lot of us out here that are. And as long as we come together and we stand together and we'll heal together, we'll always have these hands out here. We'll have them out there for those that are ready. So get your hands out. Either we're holding each other's or we have one hand out for somebody else that's ready. So just keep talking. Have your love for yourself. Have your love for your sisters and brothers that are going through it. And everything's going to be okay.
That's right. And this is wounds to wisdom from a woman that has gone through so much since childhood, little bitty
Yes.
childhood.
Yeah.
And look at the love and the passion, the post-traumatic growth. And you too have a platform to offer
Yes.
people to share their story, to empower, to inspire, to lift up. Please tell our listeners where they can find you.
They can find me at codependentme.org. I have a podcast, the Codependent Me Podcast, and I am Tamala Shaw. You can find me on Facebook. Codependent Me at outlook.com. If you want to email me about anything, I am more than willing to talk to anybody about anything that has to deal with healing or where to go, what to do. If you just need an ear, I am here. And I'm grateful for God placing me on this earth to be able to meet people like you. Agape, you are phenomenal. And I thank you. And I honor you for doing what you
Make
do.
me cry. Thank you so much, Tamala. And the same
Yes.
sentiments to you, girl. Let me tell you something. Having clarity brings purpose. Having
Yes.
purpose brings commitment. Having that commitment brings the energy. Having that energy brings, the courage. And
Yes.
with all that, we have this desire to help influence and empower. And we
Yes.
can. We can. And we
Yes,
will.
we can. And we will. And we are. Okay.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.